Welcome to Pre-Shift, tidbits of wisdom for everyday service. My name is TJ Griffin, and I'm the corporate wine educator for Winebow. We encourage, nay, we need your questions during this webinar. This webinar will be very interactive, hopefully. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we begin. And please use the Q&A rather than the chat bar. Let me introduce your host. Master Sommelier Ron Edwards is the husband of one wife, the father of 5 girls, a surfer, and a missionary kid. He has almost 30 years of hospitality experience, and since 2018, he has been the director of wine education for Winebow. And now, here to discuss today's topic, blending comfort and exploration, Master Sommelier Ron Edwards.
Good morning, TJ. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's a good day. We are not in Portland, Oregon, where it's 100 and bazillion degrees, and my air conditioning is working. And it's still hot here in Richmond. How's it up there in New Jersey?
It is hot and humid. Summer is definitely here in full force.
Well, great. It's an excuse to go to the beach because, you know, your ocean temperatures are certainly cool enough still to cool you off.
Yes.
All right, everybody. So yes, we need, if any of you were part of the conversations when we talked about the 5 Ps and we explored how each of our example industry partners were living into their 5 Ps or not. It was really great to have your comments. And so this episode is going to really need you to be thinking about how you handle these things out in your world. And yes, I think these questions apply to you, whether you're in hospitality or wholesale or retail. You just have to kind of modify what you see as the guest or the client. And so I'm going to preempt some of the questions that we're going to walk through with our discussion so that you can be pondering them. Maybe give us some gut reactions in the chat, not in the chat, sorry. Give us some gut reactions in the Q&A, even at the beginning, and then we can monitor them as we go. I know several of the names that I can see on the list of attendees have been very interactive in the past, so I'm hopeful that you will join in this time. So let's lay out those questions before we move on. The first one, and this is an honest question you got to ask yourself: how do your clients and guests see the world of alcoholic beverages? What is their perspective on it? You know, when they think about this subject matter, what immediately comes to mind, or what feeling do they get? What are some creature comforts, in quotations, that you can offer to encourage exploration? Where are you personally in the concept of exploration for alcoholic beverages? What does that mean to you? What is considered exploratory to most of your clients and guests? Probably different than what you think. What are we doing that might punish exploration for our clients? And what are we doing that rewards exploration for our clients? Those are the concepts that we need to really put some thought into before we move into our next choice, right? We have what we have at the moment, but as you're thinking of the future of your beverage program, these are things that you really should consider. All right, TJ, you ready to go on to the real topics now?
I am ready.
Do you have all your answers ready for those questions?
I am mulling them over as we speak.
All right, because you know you're the fallback plan. If nobody has anything to say, we have to rely on TJ. So don't make TJ do all the thinking today, audience, please.
I'm not worried with this group.
That's great. All right, so we hear you. If we don't hear them, we are automatically putting ourselves at a disadvantage for creating what they consider to be a beverage program they want to engage in. And we, you know, don't mistake the idea of a guest engaging in your beverage program as equal to them ordering or buying something. Those are completely different, right? When I go out to dinner, I'm going to buy a beverage, but that doesn't mean I've engaged with your program. If I go into a retail store to buy something and leave with something, that does not mean I engaged with your concept. TJ, you tracking with that? The difference between engagement and an actual purchase?
Yes.
And what would engagement look like for you?
For me, I'd want to have a conversation. I'd want to ask some questions and have some thoughtful answers. And so that I could understand what the beverage program is all about.
Excellent. And that's TJ's perspective. You know, if I'm engaging in your menu, I might involve you in a conversation, but the most important thing is I'm not looking desperately for the one thing that I actually think I could stand on and buy. You know, like if you see me in your beverage program that only has 40 wines on the list and 5 specialty cocktails, and I'm at your table and I spend 15 minutes trying to decide what to drink, that's not engagement. That's desperation. There are very, very different approaches there. We can cover that in practicality later. All right. So we need to, even if it's a virtual imagined listening session, we need to put ourselves in the place of the client and ask and hear their voice in our heads. We really have to know, what are they comfortable with already? We really have to walk in their shoes and see wine, beer, and spirits the way they do. And I was really struck by this commercial. I think it's a great commercial, by the way. Regardless of how you feel about the product or not, this is not an endorsement of Jim Beam, but it's a great commercial. And it's the Jim Beam Ginger Highball commercial example. TJ, I think you've seen it.
Yes, very funny. Very funny.
Very funny commercial. So it starts off with this guy who comes up to the bar who wishes for a second drink, right? And the bartender's like, well, what do you have? Another beer? And there's these guys off to the right-hand side in his vision, and they look up at him and go, how about a super filling IPA? And then there's some Germanic folks in Lederhosen saying, hey, how about a German whatever with Hoffenpop? And then this creepy looking Sauron like character from Lord of the Rings gets right in his ear and goes, no, you want a dark beer, son, brewed with goat's milk. And the poor guy just is in a panic, and the bartender hands him how about a Jim Beam and ginger? And he smiles and he's comfortable and he walks away. How often do we accidentally or intentionally, depending on how it's going, put our clients and guests, when they come in and look at our beverage program, in that position, that bewildering position where they feel forced into doing something that sounds terrible to them, and they're just looking for an easy, comfortable, delightful way out? TJ, did you like that commercial?
You want a dark beer? Yeah, I love that commercial. It's funny, but it's accurate too. And I think this is a statement sort of as well as a question. I haven't felt that way too many times from a person making me feel that way, but I have felt that way looking at the list or looking at the cocktails. I feel like, you know, even though it's an inanimate object, it can do the same thing to you.
Yeah, and that's really what we're talking about here, because people are the last piece of the puzzle. And they're a very important piece of the puzzle, as we talked about in our 5 Ps, which if you were not part of those, you need to go back and listen to those, because those are the principles of what makes great hospitality. But when we start looking at this, what we present, what's on our shelves in the retail stores, what's on our menus in hospitality, that gives an immediate barrier or a bridge to our clients and guests. So that's very important for us to think of. So here's our question. Here's our first question. Ready for your comments. Let's have them. How do your guests and clients see the world of alcoholic beverages? What are the thoughts that run through their head that we need to capture when we start to think about what do we want to offer them in our businesses? Come on, Laura. I know you have thoughts on this. You too, Ken. TJ, you want to throw a couple things in before I start going through my bulleted list?
Well, it's a broad question, right? I mean, it depends. I'm trying to think back to my service days or my sales days. They're all over the map, from, you know, almost complete newbies to, you know, casual experts. So I couldn't make a broad statement about how they would view it. I guess it would depend on the customer. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And your business has a target customer base, right? No matter who you are, you're not trying to serve everyone.
Right.
Very, very few businesses even have that concept in mind. And so Antonio pipes in. Thank you, Antonio. something to drink that goes with my food. All right. Certainly in the hospitality, that works. How about this? And dizzying array. When most people walk into a store that is focused on alcoholic beverages, I think that their first impression is a dizzying array. And I will even throw myself into this. I'm relatively well educated in the world of alcoholic beverages. And I'm relatively comfortable with just about all of the concepts, even if not authoritative on all of them. And when I walk into one of our large national retail providers for wine, beer, I am overwhelmed immediately. And somebody asked me, you know, I have one of these, and they mentioned the name of the store near me, and that's an easy place for me to buy wine. Could you, it was a friend of my daughter's, could you go with me to this one here and kind of point out some things that would be a good idea for me to buy? And I just looked at her and I said, you know, I feel the same way you do when I go in there, because there are so many things on the shelf that are basically buyer's own brand. And so you have to depend on region and grape type. And I'm uncomfortable in that store. I'm a master sommelier and I'm uncomfortable in your store. Wow. Looks like we have a couple more comments. Laura chimes in. Where I live, the average guest is in a very basic they need a lot of coaxing to try new things. I always made sure they had a comfort zone to start and build off of. Awesome. And Laura, I would love to know when we get into what that is, we're going to ask that question. I'd love for you to chime in what you felt like were comfort zones that you offered. And then Ken is like, as a wholesaler, customers want to engage their customer that enriches their experiences, get them to return and tell their friends about the good experience they had. I agree, Ken. And what makes the magic for that is what we're trying to address here. So think about, all right, what do you need to help them do from your perspective to get them to do that? So I think that outside of our little world of beverage professionals, I think they see alcoholic beverages as status symbols. TJ, can you jump in on that and feel good about that? That's the way a lot of consumers feel?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Especially when people are first getting into wine. Wine has a romance about it, and sort of a status thing already built into the category. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think in certain circles, the beer you drink and the spirits you consume are also status symbols, right? There are certain like the guys who were like, have a super filling IPA. You can't hang out at their table and drink Budweiser; they'll throw you out, right?
Well, a long time ago when single malts the single malt explosion. I don't know what year that was exactly. I really tried hard to become an aficionado connoisseur of single malts because it had a status thing to it. I was not successful. I'm not a Scotch guy, but the fact that I put so much effort into it shows that, yeah, status is a thing.
Yep. I think people also see alcoholic beverages in general as expensive, or at least an expense, and not necessarily an essential expense. I kind of feel like it's an essential part of my life, but most people it's an add-on. I think their preference, they definitely feel this way, and it's true. Their preference matters more than yours. You know, if somebody looks at you and says, I really want, and they know what they're talking about, I really want an oaky, round, creamy Chardonnay. And you're like, no, you don't. You're wrong. Yes, they do. Find them one. I think they want pleasure over knowledge. And this is a big, big thing for us sommeliers out there to really get really good grip on, that even though we have all this stuff running around in our head that we desperately want to share, our guests want pleasure first. And then if a little bit of knowledge transfer can come along with it, and I do mean a little bit, and they engage you there, wonderful. But start with what's going to give them pleasure first. They want their desired experience over exploration. They came to your business looking for a specific experience. Whether they can define that immediately or not, they did. And that's more important than your idea of helping them explore. And, you know, thankfully, many of our clients and guests want to explore, but comfortably, without feeling exposed, without risk. The concept. And then the last thing, and this is something that I'm probably just going to live into for a long time, TJ, is that last episode with Madeline where she talked about texture, how the average wine consumer just absolutely locks on to texture as the biggest thing that impresses them. And I think it's true about beer and cocktails too. They really value texture, and that may be the one thing they're looking for. So those are the things I think we have to hear them about. And if there are any other things we have to hear them on from our audience, or TJ, just jump right in. But let's move into this image. I don't know if anybody in the audience is an avid backpacker or what they view of as vacation, but what image do we see here, TJ? What do we got pictured here?
Is this what they call glamping?
It's definitely glamping. I got the picture by Googling, or in Adobe Adobe Stock. I searched for luxury safari, and I wanted a picture that sort of represents the idea that somebody's exploring, but they're definitely exploring on their own terms.
Yes.
The everyday wine and beer consumer will explore. They will. But in order to do that, the adventure has to feel like it's going to be comfortable. And I thought this picture was a great image. And this is a great time for everybody to start putting in their thoughts on what are some creature comforts you can offer that encourage exploration, like Laura's comment earlier. Is, think about this picture. If you love backpacking, like a couple of my daughters just love backpacking. They don't mind sleeping on the ground. It's really inspiring that they are so into it. And so rugged exploration, you think about that and call this camping, and they go, yeah, right, whatever. This is like pulling up in your motorhome, right? To the campsite, plugging in the electricity, staying in the motorhome the whole time. I mean, that's not really camping by most people's definition. But, and if you're a backpacker and you believe in that really getting out there kind of exploration, this looks even boring, maybe even a little stuffy. But if you're the person that travel means making reservations at the Ritz-Carlton after flying first class, this looks pretty rugged, right, TJ?
Yes, this would be adventurous for those people.
And so we have to keep that in mind, is that our version of adventure and exploration is not their version of adventure and exploration. And in most cases, beverage professionals, in regards to beverage exploration, are much more like the backpackers of the Explore the World in travel version, willing to go the extra mile, to be a little uncomfortable, to get that great next unusual experience. That is not who our clients are 99+% of the time. That said, even though the person who feels like this version of camping is still adventurous exploration, they are willing to explore if you give them this option of exploration, where it's all right. You can still eat on a table. You don't have to eat off your lap. We're not going to cook all our food in a jet boil. You don't have to sleep on the ground. You're going to have a bed, but you are going to be in a tent. These kind of things are how you get somebody who only drinks Pinot Grigio, or only drinks Chardonnay, or only drinks Cabernet, to move one small step away from their stylistic preference. So what are some creature comforts that come to mind for each of you in the audience that you feel like you can offer your consumer base, your client base, that will get them out of their, well, look at it this way. Their box is this big and you want it to be this big. How do we get in there? Any ideas, TJ? The audience.
Well, I was thinking about something we've talked about in the past about style. So if you had some suggestions or organization based around style of a wine, either at retail or on premise, if you like full-bodied Chardonnay, here are some other ones you might like.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great way to go. Giving them that. One of the things that I immediately think of in creature comforts is if your beverage program doesn't offer anything they've ever heard of, then you have offered them no comfort.
Right.
You
A
know,
little
so
familiarity.
yeah, a little bit of familiarity goes a really long way in regards to keeping people comfortable. So the adventure begins. You know, what is considered exploratory to most clients and guests? I mean, this was a question I asked the audience up front. I'd love to hear some of the thoughts they've had so far. But what is their version of exploration? And how closely does it match up with ours? You know, I think the easy answer is clients are way less adventurous in the scope of what they're willing to deal with than we professionals. And that their version of exploration, we probably wouldn't even consider exploration. I mean, I have to be honest, at this point, adventure for me is rare grape varieties, unheralded wine regions, you know, even alternative winemaking options. You know, things like Assyrtiko, Galliopo, Malagusia, Lagrind, Eponymy, Etna, Tasmania, Rebula. These are all normal, like, yeah, that's part of my life kind of stuff. But 99% of the guests I ever served in all my time in hospitality, these are extremely foreign concepts to them. So that's like backpacking style adventure when I bring up these kind of concepts. So ask yourself, where are you in the concept of exploration? I think it's so important that we take note of how far down the path we've gone and how far away that is from our average client. DJ, that makes sense to you?
Absolutely.
And you mean, if you try to place yourself back into the mindset of someone who hasn't, you know, in your case, you've been through CMS courses, you've been through the WSET4, you're well on your way to becoming a master of wine. How far is that from your next door neighbor who goes to the store and wants to buy a bottle of white wine for dinner?
Yeah, I think of it a time I was on vacation, and you know, as you chat up other couples, you know, one of the first things that always comes up is, what do you do in the wine business? And this is a while ago, so before a lot of the things that you just mentioned. So I was less knowledgeable by a good bit at that point. And the woman got all excited when she heard I was in the wine business. She said, "What? Oh, this wine. What's that wine that I like?" And it's okay. She's going to mention a brand that maybe I've never heard of, or you know. And she said, "What is it called? What is it? Pinot Grigio. Have you heard of that?" And of course, I had heard of Pinot Grigio at that point, and I assumed everyone in the world had heard of Pinot Grigio at that point. But she was just discovering it, and it reminded me, yeah, you forget how deep in the woods you might have gone at this point in your career in hospitality compared to most people who are just starting to explore.
Yeah. And, you know, those little shocking moments are so important to keep us grounded and keep us on the guest's side as an advocate. Laura chimes in with, I think a comfort for many starts with the price and offering a selection of new things that are in line price wise with those comfortable choices. And that will open up people to suggestion. I think that's a good idea, Laura. I think that price is, and we're going to talk about that. So when you walk into a restaurant or a retail shop and look through the selections, how often do you personally, like me, you, TJ, you, Laura, anybody else on the webinar at this point, truly choose something you've never had? I can tell you that for me, that's not very often. So why would someone with 30 years less experience in the beverage and hospitality industry than me feel comfortable with that option? They're not. We need to earn their trust. They are spending their hard-earned dollars to get that experience that they have in mind. And we need to help them do that. And, you know, if you only heard this part of the webinar and didn't hear any more, you might think that I'm advocating for beverage programs that offer nothing new and only offer comfort. And that is not the case, because what I want to get to is where we are blending the idea of some comfort to get the conversation going and provide people something they love and like and can enjoy if they're not willing to explore. And that's part of earning their trust. So how do we do that? How do we earn their trust? I think Laura brought up a good point. But number one, offer them something or some things they recognize. Group like things together stylistically. TJ brought this up earlier. If you want them to branch out, if you want them to entertain something other than Cabernet Sauvignon, put some other things next to Cabernet Sauvignon stylistically that are reasonably close that you can talk about and say, well, if you like Cabernet Sauvignon, you'll like this wine. If you like Pinot Grigio, you'll like Gruner Veltliner and Albariño. If you like, Chardonnay from Sonoma County, then you would really like this oaked Assyrtiko from Santorini. And this is why. I mean, that's how you have to get them into a, if you like this, you'll like that kind of situation. Includes similar exploratory beverage in your quote unquote, not a real word, tasteable opportunities. So, your By the Glass program, Laura, is a great idea in the concept of, if you really want somebody to figure out if they like Albariño, don't force them to buy a bottle. If you really want to expand things and you have a tasting license in your retail shop, it's a no-brainer, right? Don't just have a tasting for all the normal things everybody's ever always heard of, or whatever's in focus point for your distributor that you want to sell 30 cases of. Pick some of the other stuff. Give them the opportunity to try before you buy. Do have interesting, unusual options. If you want them to explore, give them some comfort, but still have unusual options. And unusual is in quotations because that's going to be different in every market. Unusual in New York City is not, in Brooklyn especially, is not even the same as unusual in Manhattan, which is definitely not the same as unusual in DC, which is nothing like what's unusual in Richmond. Identify wines that are outside the common wine space as being outside the common wine space. If you are wishing to promote orange wine, natural wine, pet nat, all of those fun new categories, make sure the guest knows what they're getting into. Otherwise, you're going to be buying bottles back, because you want to incentivize exploration. And one of the ways to do that is to not punish people for picking something they don't like. And the next one is incentivize exploration through pricing advantage. Laura brought that up at the beginning, and she's got another comment here. Even for her personally, she recently tried a new style for the first time, and I chose the mid-range price rather than the top or bottom price, just in case. Exactly. You know plenty, Laura, and you still were cautious as to which way you go. And then the last winter that we had something on the menu with demi-glace, and I was able to sell Le Brandi Megionio by the glass. And that took a lot of people to a new level. Absolutely. You've got to put it in context. And restaurants are a great place to put it in context because you have the option of including food. So in the end, all those options are ways to get people engaged in trying something new. The first and foremost option is be kind. Don't put your guests and clients in a position where they feel that they're in an antagonistic relationship over the exploration, meaning you have put them in a situation where nothing on the wine is normal for your market. You've put them in a position where you did not indicate that the wine was an orange wine, and they ordered it and it's white wine and it pours out brown or amber, and they are uncomfortable telling you they hate it, and people walk away thinking they like it. Put yourself in their place. See it from their viewpoint. Feel their angst and anxiety and hesitation about choosing something that they consider unusual. Feel it in your soul. And if you do, you'll make a better decision as to what to do in your own business. Give them something to latch onto without the fear that, well, if I give them, XYZ favorite in the market Chardonnay, they won't order anything else. Maybe. Some people won't order anything else. Some people will. But give them something to get their bearings and steady them before they start shopping either retail or on the menu. And do your best to kindly associate grapes and styles that you want them to explore to commonly loved wines. And those commonly loved wines are a fairly short list. You're talking about Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Grigio, and Sauvignon Blanc. And sometimes you can relate it to Malbec because that got really popular. And sometimes you can relate it to a little bit broader set. But that's pretty much the beginning point for most people who drink wine on a regular basis. If it's beer, Find out what beer they like. If they don't like IPA, why are we recommending one to them, right? If spirits and cocktails and things like that, reference the drink to something that's really common, like a margarita or a gin and tonic, or something that that most people who drink a cocktail have had once in a while. And last, and most certainly not, I want to make sure we hear this, not to end on a negative note, but on a note of caution. Never punish them for disagreeing with your taste, because when you put together a program, whether it's retail or restaurant or hotel, there is always going to be a big chunk of your taste involved. It certainly was with mine. And I regret the moments in time where I can look back now and realize that I was punishing the client for not agreeing with my taste and my judgment of quality instead of theirs. And that's not cool. I would go back and change some things in the past. All right, so we got a comment coming in from Antonio. Be enthusiastic about a wine that marries well with the dish the customer wants. Yep. When I was a maitre d' in an Italian restaurant, I had a customer come back a week later and gifted me with a bottle from his cellar of 1959 Chateau Lafite Rothschild to thank me for giving him such a wonderful recommendation the week before, making his dinner so memorable. That's pretty awesome. And that's how it works, is like when you put yourself in their place and try to make their evening the maximum experience, you'll probably make the right decision. And you may not get a bottle of 1959 Lafite Rothschild out of it, but I will tell you that through the course of my career, the truly great wines of the world and some of the oldest bottles I've ever had were at the gift of a guest who really appreciated being taken care of and either invited me over to their home or came back later with a gift, just like Antonio. There is reward for being kind to people, although that is not why we should be kind to them.
So what's next, Ron?
What's next? We're going to take over the world, just like we do every week, TJ. All right, so pre-shift, next one is arrogance versus boldness. We're going to continue this conversation in this theme because I really think this is a struggle in the real world to build an interesting program by the definition of progressing the wine world, progressing the beverage world, and doing it arrogantly. There's such a fine line between boldly promoting unusual and wonderful wines and beers and spirits to doing it for the wrong reasons. And I think it's really built into the heart of why you're doing it. And that's what we're going to talk about next time.
So I'm sensing a continuing theme throughout these webinars. We're progressing throughout this philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the one after that, we're going to talk about one of the elements of being successful in the hospitality trade. And that is the pre-shift meeting that we named this after, and maximizing it.
So that's going to be an important one as well. So join us 2 weeks from today. We'll be in July, almost mid-July there. Mm-hmm. Same time, 11 a.m. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your participation, and we will see you next time.